Oh, another person wants to volunteer with the service. That's great. Oh, but how do I even know where to start? This process seems so confusing. And how much paperwork is this going to create?
Chris, it really is a simple process. No need to pull all your hair out. Well, what's left of it. It all starts with the Volunteer Service Agreement form.
Well, this little form here?
That's the one.
The 301A form, right? But weren't there special boxes I was supposed to focus on?
There are. Box number 24 and 33 are particularly important, but we'll take it one box at a time to walk through the process.
All right, let's get started.
Well, what exactly is a volunteer?
Well, according to the Department of the Interior's volunteer policy, a volunteer is defined as an individual who performs service under a current signed individual or group volunteer agreement for the Department of the Interior without promise, expectation, or receipt of compensation for services rendered. You're not considered a volunteer if you're getting compensated, even if compensation is given outside of the service.
So who can volunteer?
Well, I can volunteer. So can I. Me too.
I can volunteer.
I can volunteer as well. Me too.
That's pretty funny. Almost anyone can volunteer for the Fish and Wildlife Service. Now I think we can get into the meat and the potatoes of the Volunteer Service Agreement form. We can save a little time here because the volunteer fills out the top half of the form. The volunteer coordinator or supervisor does need to look over this section though to ensure everything has been completed and looks correct. Things like the individual or group boxes are checked and if an OF301B is needed and attached for the group of volunteers. Also look to make sure the volunteer is either a U.S. citizen or has the appropriate visa and documentation that allows the volunteer to be with the service. The volunteer's emergency contact information is definitely important and needs to be supplied, but the ethnicity portion is of course optional. Now moving on to the good stuff. The government official fills out the...
Hold on a second. We're starting with this government official section, but the volunteer didn't fill out number 4. What's up with that?
Good point. No one knows why the agreement number box is all the way up there. It just is. And you're right, we did skip over it. The agreement number box is an optional box for you, the supervisor or coordinator, to fill out if the station keeps records of how many volunteers and projects are occurring at their office or complex. It isn't required, but may be helpful for the station. I know, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Make sense?
Sure.
Ready to move on?
Absolutely. This really isn't that bad.
So the last half of the page and flip side is up to the government official to complete. Box 24 is an especially important section. Now it's critical you provide an accurate description.
Okay, I think I've got it from here, thanks. The volunteer will staff the Wading Duck National Wildlife Refuge Visitor Center, provide information to visitors, maintain the outdoor facilities including the nature trail, kiosk, and vault toilets located adjacent to the visitor center, and provide nature hikes for youth, which will require a Child National Agency check with inquiries background investigation. All volunteer work will be conducted from July 1st through September 20th, 2018, between the hours of 8 a.m. and 4:30 p.m.
Are you sure you covered everything?
This is perfect. It's detailed, it gives dates, times, and the exact duties the volunteer will be performing. Everything is covered.
Okay.
Okay, maybe I didn't think of everything.
But that's actually quite a great start. What does need to be added is the volunteer will operate a government vehicle while performing these duties. The volunteer will take a defensive driving course and show proof of a valid driver's license. When filling this box, make sure to include location, project duties, dates and times of service, beginning and end date, training required and provided, tools, equipment, personal protective equipment needed and provided. These are all the actions and duties that are being covered under the Fish and Wildlife Service liability, so be sure to include all activities. And Chris, you did a pretty good job. A job hazard analysis is also a required attachment to this form for any hazardous tasks that the volunteer may be performing. Other boxes to focus on to ensure that the volunteer reads and understands the form are boxes 33 and 34 prior to their signature. The standard language in this block represents the legally binding basis for the agreement and includes important waiver statements, notification to the volunteer of potential background checks, disclaimers about volunteer service and liability, and a photo release, meaning their photos can be used in various capacities, but also any photos they take while serving as a volunteer are property of the government and cannot be sold for profit. Box 35 is the box for you, the coordinator or supervisor, for you to sign that states the volunteer service agreement obligates the service. Box 36 through 37, the government official should enter the date when volunteer services end and then provide a signature. Remember to retain this volunteer service agreement on file in your office for 3 years and then shred the document. And keep in mind, a volunteer service agreement must be revised and re-signed every single year. And if everything I just said over the course of this entire video still has you scratching your head,
Possible.
there are detailed written instructions available on how to complete the OF 301A and the 301B form for both individual and group volunteers that you can request from your regional or national volunteer coordinator.
I love having volunteers, and the work they do is extraordinary now that I know how easy this process is, and the importance of this Volunteer Service Agreement, VSA for short. I'm opening my doors to more volunteers anytime.
We can cut it because that